Hey, Tom Bartels from GrowFoodWell.com, and I'm shooting this video on March 23rd here in Durango, Colorado, which is the first few weeks of what's called the Covid-19 worldwide pandemic, which you're no doubt aware of wherever you live because it's a worldwide phenomenon that we're all experiencing right now, and it's a bit surreal. It's a bit like, I can't help but thinking, it's a bit like planet Earth has said, okay, all you humans go home everywhere and sit down and think about what you've been doing. It's a very interesting time, a lot of introspection, a lot of questions going on, a lot of panic, some anxiety for good reason. But I wanted to give you a few thoughts on how it relates to food in your lives and how we react to food in general as far as present day society, and a few pointers on spring planting techniques that can help you ramp up your spring garden because many of you are wanting to get out and plant since we're all stuck at home for a few months maybe. What a great time to get out and start planting because it's readily available and there's nothing better to do in this kind of crisis than to start growing some food since it's spring, perfect timing, and so I'll be talking about that as well. But as far as the food and how it relates to this kind of crisis that everybody's going through, it's interesting to watch how people, even with a perceived interruption of access to food, because we don't really have a food shortage per se in most of the U.S., we have certain things spiking in the grocery stores like toilet paper and beans and things like that. But still, there's plenty of food in the system. It's interesting to watch how we tend to get panicky or anxious-ridden if that access to food is cut off for good reason, because we need it every single day. And for those of you that grow some of your own food and maybe store it and process it for later use, you know that it feels somewhat calming to have that access to your own food and know that you can grow more. For instance, we've got food in the pantry, in the root cellar. I've got carrots still in the ground from last year that we can harvest that's been under a couple feet of mulch, so they're doing great. There's dried beans and fruits and vegetables in the pantry. We've got fermented foods, frozen foods, all kinds of stuff from the beds from last year that we can still eat for the next month or so. So it doesn't provide all of your food in most cases when you grow at home because most of us don't have enough space to actually grow all of our food. But when you have some around and you have the skills and the understanding of how it works into your lifestyle, how to continually provide food for your family, it creates a very calming effect in these kinds of crises. And I can tell you that after growing food at home for over 20 years now, it's one of the most comforting and practical steps you can take towards better health and self-reliance. And one of the reasons I'm reaching out today to talk to potential gardeners or people that are thinking of expanding on a present garden is to go ahead and inspire you to act on that impulse to grow some of your own food at home. It's just one of the best, most practical, healthy things you can do. It'll improve your strength of your own immune system as well as give you a great learning experience with your family, your neighbors, your friends. It's just good all around. I can't say enough about it. So if you're feeling the impulse in general to grow food and you're feeling a little anxiety about it, treat this as an invitation to come right in. The water's fine. You're going to be okay. You'll learn how to grow food even if you don't know how right now. It's easier than you think once you use the right methods. I've been doing it 20 years now, and it's just incredibly healthy for us here at the house. It's probably the most healthy, grounding thing I do in my life. And after 20 years, it's just become a root part of my routine. I have all kinds of other work outside the garden. I try to do it in ways that don't take too much time. And that's the whole point, is increasing yields while you're reducing your labor. So today, I was going to talk about a few of the things that I'm doing in early spring, and you can relate that to wherever your growing season may be starting and what you have to start. This week might be a good time to start thinking about that because we have all this spare time all of a sudden. So in most of my beds, I've gone around and looked at my mulch from last winter. It's been protecting the beds really nicely and keeping the soil food web active so that that soil is ready when planting time comes around. And my worm bins are doing fine. They were protected through the winter using my coffee biofurnace technique and the The hens are laying now. They're well into their spring laying season, so they're going to lay all summer long. We'll have eggs every day for the next 8 months or so. So the gears are starting to turn as far as the spring melt off, and we're starting to see the influx of birds and insects coming on. So it's really fun to welcome that season after the equinox and see things come alive again, and that's what's happening here in Colorado. And of course, as far as seeds go, we've got lots of our open pollinated varieties that we've saved from previous years, so that we don't have to buy so much seed anymore. We find that we can acclimatize plants to our local climate conditions year after year, and as you save those seeds, they will grow even more readily in your climate as you do so. But it's important to collect only open pollinated seeds because hybrid seeds don't work quite that way. So for instance, I've got a bucket of pole beans here that are ready to go. I've got probably enough for 100 square feet or so in this bucket alone. I've got several. And so we can just crack these seed pods open and replant these pole beans and have beans for the whole next year. And that's part of the learning process, is collecting a portion of your crop from the previous year so that you can plant it out. And that's the same with corn or seed potatoes, most of our greens, tomatoes. You can save all those seeds as long as you've got open pollinated seeds. So if you're buying seeds right now, make sure you get open pollinated varieties. So you're probably wondering what I'm doing right here with this stuff. Today is a good day to start my seedlings since we're about 7 weeks out from our frost date. So these are soil blocks, and this is a really nice way to get seedlings going strong in the spring. I've got a whole workshop on the recipe here and how all this works, but in short, I will plant about 500 seeds today in these soil blocks, which I'm making with this soil block press here. And it reduces plastic. It helps the plant in all kinds of ways. It reduces transplant shock and root binding, everything else. But the most important thing is I'm starting that process ahead of time because we have a short season here in Colorado. It's about 130 days. So for the tomatoes, peppers, some of the longer season plants, eggplant, etc., we have to start things ahead of time because we have such a short season. So these will be under lights for about 7 weeks on a timer. And what's nice about the soil blocks is during that period, I only have to water these once every 3 or 4 days because you just pour water in the tray and it wicks up from the bottom, so you get less damping off and other diseases that tend to hit seedlings. So I'll be putting those out today, getting those germinating, and then they'll be ready for spring planting. And then I'm going to dig up the rest of my carrots probably this week and get that bed put away. It's the last bed from the last winter that had activity in it. I will be planting another 1,000 carrots or so in a different bed. I'll be rotating that, but every year I plant about 1,000 carrots or so. And I'll be using the cornstarch method, which I have a quick video on, and I'll just show you what it does. It's an amazing way to germinate carrots really easily and create a very successful bed of carrots. As you'll see in the video, it'll show you how to kind of jumpstart that. So if you like carrots, here's a great video. Let me jump right into that for you and show you how it works. Hey, Tom Bartels from GrowFoodWell.com. Thanks for joining me. Today we're going to talk about planting and growing carrots and the best way I know how to grow carrots for success. And carrots are difficult to germinate, which is why a lot of people find failure with them. The seeds are very, very sensitive to drying out. The germination process might take a couple of weeks, so you really have to baby the bed for those 2 weeks. And most people have lives and jobs and they miss a few days, and that might be the day they germinate and the carrot seeds dry out and then they don't get propagation. So today I'm going to show you a method to avoid most of that that'll really ensure success in most cases. And I'm going to be using a cornstarch gel that allows us to get two great advantages. One, we germinate the seeds indoors in water until you see just the tip of a root coming out of the seed itself. So using a magnifying glass or a magnifier of some sort, keep an eye on those seeds. It should take about 4 days. And when you can see a few seeds that are just breaking through the seed coat with a little bit of a root tip, that's when you want to put them out to plant. And then the second part is that cornstarch gel allows complete dispersion, as you'll see, throughout the gel mass in a plastic bag. So first off, the recipe for the gel is 2 tablespoons of cornstarch to 1 cup of water. That's just the ratio. So 2 tablespoons to 1 cup of water. So you can make 6 cups if you have a lot of carrots to plant, but that would be 12 tablespoons of cornstarch. Make sure that's on medium heat on the stove, and you want to mix that cornstarch in really early. Don't let it settle to the bottom, it'll goo up too fast, so keep stirring it. It'll take about 5 minutes, and as it comes to a boil, it'll clear up and it'll turn into a clear gel. Then you take that off the stove and you cool it. Make sure it's cool, that's very important. You don't want to put the seeds into a hot gel. So once the gel is cooled, you want to portion that off depending on which types of carrots you're growing. If you're just growing one kind, put it all in one baggie, and you're going to add your germinated seeds, bring them outside, and here you can see I've got this bed prepared. It's been amended with compost, and now I've got some drip lines in here. And you'll notice I've got a little trough that's just cut on the side of each line of drip tape, and that's important. I've found that if you put it right below the drip tape, the carrot seedlings have a really tough time getting around that drip tape. So put it just to the side. It'll still get water, but that way it won't be interrupted by trying to grow around the drip tape itself. And now we're going to take that baggie and we're going to very carefully clip a very small hole on the corner of the bag, and we'll be moving that gel strip, and it'll come out in a little tube of gel with pretty equal distribution of seeds. They kind of float around. You can massage the bag a little bit to make sure there's equal distribution, and then when you start pulling that line of gel out of the baggie, it'll drop into that trench quite readily. Then you'll just kind of backfill it with a little bit of soil, not too much. You don't want to bury these, they're very small seeds, and we'll water that. But I pre-watered these trenches so that you don't have to worry about getting the water past the seed. That's always a good idea with these smaller seeds. And then once we get that covered, I'm going to cover this with a light mulch of compost, and we'll keep that wet for the next 3 or 4 days, and we should start to see the seedlings break through the soil at that point. So this is a lot easier than the traditional way of putting all your seeds out for the carrot bed and keeping them wet for weeks on end until they germinate and break the soil. So I hope that was helpful for you. This is a very easy way to plant carrots, and it'll add to your success. No matter how big your garden is or where you're growing, I always suggest to my students to at least dedicate one bed to the super nutrient-dense deep greens. I call mine the Super 7. I always do one every year. Even on my small 4x8 bed, you can easily fit 7 different varieties in there. You might start with collards, kale, arugula, Swiss chard, and spinach. There's several others you can rotate in there, and you'll see in the video coming up how that works. But basically, I make green drinks out of them every day. They're superfoods, super nutritious, and they'll keep your immune system really strong for things like the flu that come in. So let's check out how that works on this next video. A lot of my students really love this, and this is how you grow the most nutrient density per square foot. I call it my Super 7 bed, and what I do is grow the highest nutrient density greens that are out there in very dense plantings, and then I do a cut and go kind of harvesting throughout the season, and I make green drinks with it, and it's really easy to do. There's probably 10 different types of plants that fit that category, but I just call it the Super 7 because I do use these 7. So let me show you that really quick. So for those of you that have smaller garden spaces, you can do this at home and get really good nutrition out of a small space. Now this is going to require just a little bit of time travel, so tighten your seatbelts, here we go. So here's an example of a Super 7 bed. This 4x8 bed has 7 different varieties in it of deep greens that are the highest nutrient-dense greens you can grow, pretty much. You can substitute a couple of different ones for spinach instead of the orac, and I can get into details with that in a little bit. But for the most part, this is the highest nutrient-dense bed you could grow. And what I do with this throughout the summer is I take off and harvest leaves from each of the 7 plants and make green drinks out of it, stir fries, and salads. And this is a really easy way to get high nutrition into your diet without a large space, without growing a ton of different vegetables. I'm growing 40 or 50 different kinds of vegetables on the 16 beds on the property, but as far as a real quick and easy way to get high nutrition out of your garden in one bed, this is the way to do it. Now this is planted with biointensive spacing, so you can see that it's really dense in here. The canopy of all these plants is covering, there's a ladybug, good to see those. The canopy of the plants themselves are covering the bed and shading it, so we have less evaporation. We have more intense competition with weeds, so you don't have to weed this bed anymore because it's just covering all the photosynthesis in the bed with its own vegetable matter. So briefly, let's look at some of the varieties that are here. We've got kale. I've got two different kinds of kale, but I'm counting them as one variety. Red mustard. This is Orac, which is a spinach substitute that doesn't have oxalic acid. Really nice, nutritional, heavy green leaf. This is Swiss chard, which you're probably all familiar with. Then I've got arugula down here, and beet greens, which are really ounce per ounce more nutrition than the beet itself. And then I've also got some pak choy, some Asian greens down in the back. And of course we've got collards up front and over here. So between those, I think that might have been 8 even, but you can substitute a few of these greens and add some different ones, but you can just about fit 7 in high volume. So here we've got the Super 7. We've got one alternate with the Asian greens here. I'm going to set those aside for now, but we have Orac, red mustard greens, arugula, kale, beets, Swiss chard, and collard greens. So we're going to take all of these, give them a quick rinse in the sink, strain them out, and then we're going to just put them all in the blender. The only thing I'm going to take out of here are the stalks from the center of the more stockier leaves, like in the collards and kale, and I'll just grab a quick knife here, and then just go ahead and slice that right out, and you can put that aside. You can use those in cooking later. They're a little bitter. There's a lot of cellulose there, not as much nutritional value as the rest of the leaf. I'm also going to do that on the collard green there. Take out that center rib. So that's ready to go. Now I'm going to do the beets I just put in whole, so we've got the beets there. The arugula, the stalks on the arugula are going to be a little bit bitter, so I tend to pull the leaves off those main stems. And early on, the leaves will be a little bit less bitter than later in the season. And that bitter flavor is something you want to get used to because it's not necessarily a bad thing. Some of the best nutritive plants happen to have bitter flavor. On this kale, when it's a little bit stocky, I pull that back stalk out of there on the backbone of the leaf, the main center portion. I'm going to take those out. Take the bigger base of the stem off the red mustard. That'll all kind of reduce bitter flavor without reducing too much of the nutrition. The Orac is interesting. You can just strip it and that center rib kind of comes right out. You just put your thumb on the base of the leaf and pull it and that rib just kind of comes right out. So that's kind of handy. And then same thing on this dinosaur kale. I'm going to take that rib right out of there, like so. And there you have it. Now we've got 7 of those greens trimmed up. The one thing I do to start is I'll take about a single apple, depending on how many portions I'm making. This is going to sweeten up this drink quite a bit, and it's a natural sugar in the apple. You don't want to add any extra sugar, but fruit sugar is about as healthy as it gets as far as sugar is concerned. So we're going to add that apple into the blender first, and I find that if you blend the apple before you put the greens in, it tends to process a little better. So I'm going to make some noise. I'm going to go ahead and take my greens, and I can cut them up to make it a little easier so it doesn't just mat in layers in the food processor. Just get them into some 2-inch squares, just chop them up a little bit, and drop them in the side with the apple. And that's basically all the physical materials other than water. Now I'm going to take some water and add that to the mix before I start the food processor up again. I'm adding maybe a cup or 2, and it depends on how thick or thin you like your green juice. We'll start with about a cup in there just to get it mixing. And I can see it's pretty thick still, so I'm going to add another, 2 cups or so. And then I'm going to let that run a bit. Now you can check on it once in a while. It's got this wonderful smell. It just smells incredible. Very nutritious. Many people like to add ginger or other flavors or herbs, etc. You can do that to your own tastes. I tend to just leave it as the base nutrition that I'm looking for from the Super 7 in the garden, with a little bit of apple in there just to sweeten it up just a touch. Makes it a little bit more palatable. Otherwise, it's relatively bitter as a drink, but if you get used to it, it's great. But I do like a little bit of apple, so I'm going to thin that out even a little more and add some more water. So the total water that was added to that was roughly 4 cups, and you can take it straight out of the mixer like that, and there's your green drink. It's going to have a little bit of the chunks in there from the vegetables themselves, but super good for you. If you don't like the vegetables, you can always use a strainer and just strain this in, and you'll just get the juice like you see here at the bottom that's filtering out. But I like to eat the entire plant. There's so much micronutrient material in there that it's super healthy for you. If you want to break this material down even further, just leave it in the food processor for longer, and it'll get smaller and smaller and be like a thick smoothie. Right now this is relatively thick, but I like it. It's like a liquid salad. So try one. You can put different flavorings in here that you like. Make sure they're all organic and plant-based if you're going for the full nutrition. And do try it. The green drink's coming out of the Super 7 garden. There is so much nutrition in this one glass of green drink that you really can't get it anywhere else. The Super 7 bed is just one of dozens and dozens of different types of food growing techniques that we teach people. And if these methods seem odd to you or they're a little bit out of your comfort zone, they're really not that hard to learn. And if you want to get comfortable with growing food at home, no matter what size your garden, and if you want some practical methods for growing food like this in a step-by-step model toward greater self-reliance, I'm offering a 50% discount on my entire gardening series right now. It's called the Food Gardener's Video Workshop. And I've cut the price in half because we're all concerned about money right now in the present crisis. So I'm trying to get as many people in as possible by cutting the price in half so that they can start growing this season. So for those of you, no matter what size your garden or your growing situation, if you're looking at trying to get better methods for growing more food with less work, I invite you to join the program. So there should be a link somewhere on this page related to the video. Once you click the link and register and get in the program, you can start streaming the videos right away today. And there's no monthly fees or anything, so you can keep the videos as long as you like. You can join the memberships that we have with people in all 50 states and 14 other countries that are enjoying that new feeling of self-reliance and understanding how to work food into their own lifestyle. And these are people with jobs and lives that are busy, but we can find ways to bring food growing into their schedule and reduce the amount of time they spend on the food and increase their yields, which is what this program's for. So please do join in today. If you have any interest in growing food, it's half off, and I'd love to see you on the other side and help you get going on your garden this spring. Thanks for listening. Now get out there and grow some food. And go wash your hands.